Hi, I'm Carmen Ramirez, your host of WorkComp Talk podcast. Now, usually I'm joined by my co-host, Bilal Kassim, co-founder of Pacific Workers, the lawyers for injured workers, Northern California's top workers' compensation law firm. He's out on paternity leave, so while he is out, I am making some quick adjustments to our podcast because there's something really important that I want to share with you. Every month, we host a live webinar with Pacific Workers. It's held the last Wednesday of the month at 12 p.m. It's during lunchtime, so you can join us if you're still working. We share a lot of information, tips, and just all of the knowledge we have, and we break it down for you in a way that's easily for you to understand how the workers' compensation system works. I would love to invite you to our next one, which is coming up on August 27th at 12 p.m. Make sure you go down to the show notes and click on that link so you can save your spot. We only have a few spots left for this next one. I don't want you to miss out on it. Now, if you've been following our podcast and you caught the first part of this webinar series, then you've learned how important it is to understand when you get a denial in workers' comp, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of your case. It's actually the beginning of your fight. There's a lot of information you're going to want to check out of our webinar series. I'm going to leave all the links for you to check on the description. So if you're watching this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and that bell so you can get notified when I upload new content. So in part 2, we are going to talk about the deadlines that can either make or break your case, the reality of the insurance doctors that they can actually hurt your claim, and most importantly, I'm going to talk about one of the biggest misconceptions injured workers have when they file a claim, and that's thinking that you're suing your boss when you submit a work injury claim. So that is one of the biggest misconceptions. Stick around for this second part of our webinar series because it has a lot of surprises and a lot of tips. Without further ado, let's get to it. Talk about the deadlines here, because obviously the insurance company is not going to send you a letter in the mail with a huge notice that says, hey, you have 30 days to hurry up and make a decision. Otherwise, your case is done and there's nothing you can do about it. So let me know about any timeframes that people need to know in regards to denials, please.
There's a lot of denials in workers' compensation. There's a lot of issues you face. There's a lot of different deadlines that you have to run into and deal with. I would say that the biggest deadline, probably the most important, is the one to actually file your case at the Workers' Compensation Appeals Board. Regardless of what's going on in your case, there are statute of limitations for that. And if you miss that deadline, you basically waive your right to challenge anything.
Yikes.
So the process entails is fairly complicated, filing an application, serving the insurance company, all that stuff. But that's probably the biggest. There are deadlines associated with things throughout the case, like IMR. There's a deadline to file your application to appeal treatment denial. There's typically a delay period that you can use to either request a QME or actually challenge PTP's opinion. There's definitely periods of time that are important to the process by which the insurance company actually looks at your case and determines whether or not they want to accept liability. And understanding that and holding the insurance company accountable to those deadlines is incredibly important, as well as the consequences if they don't meet those deadlines. I think really it depends on what you're talking about. When you're looking at workers' comp, there's deadlines everywhere. There's deadlines to provide records to QMEs. There's deadlines to file trial exhibits. There's deadlines to request QMEs, deadlines to file your case in court. And I think the problem with workers' comp is that it's so complex that someone going through it for the first time they don't understand big picture, how everything fits together. And the deadlines can be very unforgiving if you miss deadlines, and that's the end of it. There's no exceptions to deadlines because you didn't know or that you didn't understand. And that's why we always tell clients up front, hey, look, you may feel like this is comfortable and easy for you-ish while everything's going. But when things aren't going right, when things start to get complex, when things that have already gone in your case can't be reversed, it makes life extremely difficult. And so we always prefer our firm to say, hey, look, if you want to handle your own case, good luck, God bless, we wish you success. But we highly recommend getting an attorney from the get-go, especially before you've seen a QME or an insurance-oriented doctor that's really going to make life difficult for you.
Yeah, for sure. You keep talking about the insurance-oriented doctors, and I think would be the best moment to share that information. Remember, this webinar is to teach you some of the things that the insurance company's not going to let you know that you wouldn't otherwise know unless someone told you. And with that being said, Secret number 2, insurance doctors aren't impartial, meaning, oh yeah, the insurance is going to send me to the best doctor that is going to look out for my best interest. We talked about it a little bit in the previous conversation, but I think one of the biggest pain injured worker space is biased medical reports that can one harm your case because again, not every doctor is going to look out for your best interest. They're not siding with the injured worker. They might be going through a different rabbit hole, whatever the reasons they do what they do. But that is another big one. Can you tell us a little bit about how important it is to know these doctors and why it's important for you to choose the correct doctor from the MPN list? Walk us through a little bit of some strategies that someone can use to make sure that they don't fall into this big error, which is having the wrong doctor on their case.
It's no secret. There's doctors that are more insurance oriented than others. There's doctors that are more injured worker oriented than others. That's just the way things have shaken out over the years. I'd mentioned earlier, there's medical facilities that are the preferred provider for employers and insurance companies, and they're preferred for one reason. They're more likely to get you back to work faster at a lower cost with less lost time and benefits than another doctor would be. There's other doctors that are going to be more of the mind that they're going to keep you off of work for as long as possible and give you as much treatment as possible before even considering whether or not it's appropriate to send you back to work. And those are only things that you learn over time. I've been in this industry as a paraprofessional as well as a lawyer now for going on almost 20 years. And so I've seen it all. I've been a defense person. I've been an applicant person. And so I've got to know the players. I've got to know who's who. You have conversations with these people. You see them at conferences. You see them at events, and you get to understand where everyone falls and where their allegiances are. And you also understand over time seeing how, these different allegiances impact cases and the opportunities that people get or don't get depending on who they're stuck with.
And plus, it's not like you're only handling one case. It's like you have multiple cases, and I'm assuming multiple cases with the same doctors, and you get to see what their medical reports look like, right? Because there's doctors who pour in their heart and soul into a report and are very thorough and they're truly out there to do their job. And then there's doctors that half-ass everything. So
There's doctors that just look at things inappropriately. I don't want to go off in the deep end with stories, but there was a doctor who refused to conclude that my client had a back injury as a result of being a chef for 15 years. And my client had alleged a serious back injury because over time, working in the kitchen on his feet for 12, 13 hours a day, lifting heavy sacks of potatoes that are like 75 pounds, constantly bending, stooping, twisting, bent over the grill, and like doing all these various tasks, over time, wear and tear. He ultimately needed some serious surgery. The surgery failed. And on top of that, he had to have a pain pump put into him to literally keep intravenous and medicines coming in to handle his pain consistently. He couldn't even lift up his daughter anymore. It's heartbreaking. And his doctor literally said that he does not believe there is such a thing called cumulative trauma. Cumulative trauma being that there's repetitive wear and tear on body parts that cause symptoms and pain problems over time. And so he just said, look, I don't think there's cumulative trauma to the spine. Not in this case, but in any case. Medically, I don't think that concept exists. Despite literally everyone else in the world having cumulative trauma, it's to say, you know what, fine, a soldier that carries 300 pounds on their back, roughing for 20 miles in a day, or a firefighter wearing 200 pounds of gear, or a construction worker, they're just going to age the same way, just like everyone else, because there's no such thing as cumulative trauma. It's BS. And there's doctors like that are out there. They really are. But they refuse to acknowledge concepts, types of injuries that happen, regardless of who it is, when it happened, how often. They just don't care. And but you're not going to know that. As an injured worker, first time going through workers' compensation, you might just see, oh, I got Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob looks good to me. I'm sure he'll handle my case just fine. He's a doctor, so he has to care about me. It's not the case.
And even if it's not the first case, I would add on here that this would also happen to someone who's going through a second injury because second injuries do happen, unfortunately. And you're not going to get the same doctor. And just because your first doctor was positive doesn't necessarily mean that the second one is going to be the exact same way. So again, denials and insurance doctors not being your friends is not the end of the road. You have strategies, you have ways to go around it, which is one, important, get your medical files. See what the doctor is talking about. and ask for copies when you go visit the doctors. You have the right to see and check out what, their notes and their opinions and stuff like that. So get your medical file. We talked about the second opinions. If you don't like this doctor, you can get a different opinion elsewhere. Knowing these doctors on the medical provider network lists, which are the lists that belong to each insurance companies. Every insurance has different lists. Knowing that you can change a doctor, right, Bilal? You can change a doctor if you don't feel like the first one is working out for you. And what I mean by that is primarily the main doctor for your case, the primary treating physician. You could ask to change your doctor.
Yeah, I just think it's important for people to know, though, if you want to change your doctor, sooner the better. Once it gets to a certain point, you may actually be barred from changing your doctor. If your doctor has discharged you from care without any future medical care, and you try to request a change in treating physician after that, for example, the insurance company is going to deny it. They're going to say, look, your doctor already said you don't need any more follow up. So that means you don't need another doctor. So the earlier you can change your doctor, the better off you're going to be to avoid a lapse in benefits or having to wait, for example, to go to a QME to challenge your treating doctor's opinion. So, no sooner the better if you want to make a change.
Yeah. And we also have another podcast that dives deeper into that topic. And again, I would love to cover everything in depth because there's so much to cover. Unfortunately, we can't do that just with this one single webinar. So I highly encourage you guys just look up Work Comp Talk on YouTube. There's so much information where we do dive into those specific topics as well. Again, today's topic is to just making sure that you guys know that there are ways that you can go around the system because you have the right to, number one. And number two, because you need to know this as well. There's a lot of things that are going to come at you that you might not even know that there is another way around or that there is actually a right behind it that you are entitled to. So thanks for sharing that, Bilal. It opens up a lot of scenarios for a lot of people that feel stuck in the system, and it happens a lot. So secret number 3. Are you guys ready for this one? This is like probably the number one more than any other, I would say, is thinking that you are suing your boss because you got injured. Meaning, I work for a company. I love my boss. I have a great relationship. Maybe it's even a small mom and pop shop where you really have this relationship with the owner of the company. You accidentally get injured and things happen, and you feel like you don't want to hurt this company. And you have this mindset that if you open up a workers' comp case or a claim because you've been injured, that the one that is going to pay out of pocket, the one that is going to have to sell their house, their cat, their wife, everything to pay for your needs is going to be your boss. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And that's the belief, right? Getting a lawyer and is suing my employer. Please walk me through this.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is a pretty common issue, especially for smaller companies. Every company in California that has employees is required to have workers' compensation insurance, which means that there's people across the state that are getting injured, not just working for Amazon, but for Bob's Donuts or Charlie's Liquor Store, all these small shops and companies that maybe have 1, 2, 3 employees. And oftentimes in those situations, there's a very personal relationship between the person who owns and operates the company and the employee who's injured. And in most cases, people think, gee, this is going to be great. I know the boss. I know the guy in charge. That means I'm going to get a lot of love. I'm going to get positive attention. They're going to take care of me. I'm not going to have any problems with this process than as if I were at a big company where I'm just a number and I'm just another cog in the wheel and they don't care. They'd rather just fire me and get rid of me. And a lot of times what I've seen is it's actually the opposite. A lot of times these bigger companies have HR departments. They have professionals that understand the laws and understand how the claims process works. And they're not as connected to or personally related to the injured worker. So they look at claims more objectively and by the book. When you run into small shops, the perception of the owner is that you're just going after me. Why would you do this to me? And they feel betrayed and they feel offended by the fact that someone wants to pursue a workers' compensation case. And that largely that's the result of the money component. Workers' compensation insurance has premiums, just like car insurance. The more premiums there are, or excuse me, the more injuries there are, the higher the premiums go. And people feel like when someone gets injured at work, that it's like a personal attack on them. At least that's how these employers treat it. And a lot of times they'll try and take a personal angle at it and say, well, you don't want to file this case because you know it's going to make my insurance premiums go up. It's going to be harder for me to operate. We barely have any margins as is. We're barely scraping by, blah, 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 blah. And they try and guilt trip the employee to not pursue the case. And it's not a case against the employer. It's a case against the insurance. Yes, your employer's insurance premium may go up a little bit, but choosing not to pursue the case is immeasurably more damaging to you than whatever increase in premiums they're going to have. Do you want to avoid your boss's premium going up by $20 a month and leave you without money to pay rent, without money to pay for your kids, without money to put food on the table, without your health and welfare suffering and pain? It's nothing personal. It's a claims process. It's not necessarily a lawsuit. It's certainly not against your employer unless they're illegally uninsured, but it's an insurance claim process. And, once the case is filed, we're largely dealing with the insurance company. We're not dealing with the employers involved to the extent that work accommodations are needed, whether or not they can bring you back, whether or not they're respecting your work restrictions, stuff like that. But really, we're talking about the insurance company and the injured worker, and that's it. So I think there's a really big misconception about that. And a lot of people are afraid to pursue the process because they're afraid to mess up their relationship with their employer. But guess what? Your employer is going to turn their back on you. I've seen it happen to people who've been employed for a month. I've seen it happen to people employed for 20 years. It doesn't matter. You just got to take care of yourself first.
That sucks. And I'm glad we're, again, talking about this subject. Bilal, you've shared a lot of information in regards to the fact that you are not suing your boss when you open a claim for an injury at work or an illness. It's important to understand that insurance policies are the ones held accountable. And this is your life you're talking about. This is your future you're talking about. Not only yours, it's your family's as well. How does this pan out for your wife, for your kids, if you have a family? How does this pan out for your future? So it's really important to take that into consideration, I would say. And it's also important to know that getting an attorney, getting a legal team doesn't mean you're paying out of pocket. That also feels like a burden to many people. Hey, yeah, but I'm going to have to pay the lawyer his fees. I don't have that type of money. How does this pan out? How do I fix this issue? How do I deal with this? And I guess that's where we come in and explain this is not a thing that even comes out of your bank account. It doesn't come out of your pocket. So, Bilal, can you please explain to us how you would pay for an attorney if you needed to get an attorney for your claim?
You find an attorney for one. Once you find that attorney, I think it's important that you feel good about the attorney. Attorneys will offer you consultations that should not be paid. If an attorney is charging you for a consultation, run away. But the attorney should sit down with you. Their team will sit down and have a chat with you and really understand what you're going through, talk about your injury, how you're feeling, the types of medical treatment you got, and really help you understand where you are on the map and help give you guidance. Even without signing up, they should be able to explain to you what the process is like. And hopefully you found the right attorney and they've inspired confidence enough that you want to sign up with them, at which point you fill out what are called retainer documents, essentially the agreement for the attorney and how they're compensated, which in California is contingency fee based, meaning attorneys in workers' comp do not charge by the hour. They do not charge upfront. Like, for example, if you have a DUI and you hire a DUI attorney to represent you in criminal court, usually they say, hey, pay me $5,000 upfront, right? Which is much different. Workers' comp, we only get paid if we win, which means if ultimately we get you a settlement, our fee is based on the settlement at the end of the day. Sometimes there's points in the case where we get you extra benefits or penalties or things like that, in which case we're also awarded a fee, but it's nothing that comes out of your pocket, right? You're not paying us from your own checking account, savings account, whatever. You're not writing us checks throughout the case for things. The payments to the attorneys come from the insurance companies. And it's usually at the end of a case when the case settles. And typically the fee is 15%.
Okay, that's good to know. So I hope you guys are taking notes down because all this information is not information that they're going to give you in a packet. Hey, here are your medical benefits. Here's what to expect. Not to say that you don't get anything in the mail. Yes, you do get some type of instructions, but unless you know the system, there are going to be things that you don't even know that you are entitled to. Well, that's part 2 of our webinar series. I hope you learned a lot because I know a lot of people are so grateful with the information we put on the podcast. If you want to know what it's like to go to these live webinars, then go ahead, click the link below. It's in our description and register for our next one that's coming up on August 27th at 12 p.m. I was about to say October. Well, we shared a lot on the second part of this webinar series, right? We shared what can make or break your case. We also shared about the importance that a denial is not necessarily the end of your case, it's the beginning of your fight, and how insurance doctors can actually hurt your case and they're not on your side. I hope you stick around for the next episode because for this third part, we're going to dive into the Q&A section of the webinar. We had a live audience at the time and there was a lot of questions being asked that Bilal answered. And you never know. You might not even know about these questions or even have these questions because you're not on that part of your case. But hearing other people's stories are going to help you understand how this system here in the workers' compensation world works in the state of California. I hope you get to join me on the next episode. I'll catch you guys next week.